Well, I'm really, really pleased to welcome into this cozy little book nook a brand new anointed author just published, Dr. Gemima Fitzgerald. It is so exciting to have you with us here, Gemima. I mean, you know how delighted I am. Like the photos that you've been posting in the group and all of the conversation, and there's just been real rejoicing over this book coming out, hasn't there?
There really has, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and
For me.
that's one of the things that I've loved about this whole journey, actually walking through this process with a group of first-time authors,
Mm,
is that there's this camaraderie, and
so
when we're seeing someone reach a milestone or like just have a breakthrough, the whole house just erupts with joy. It's so exciting. But Jemima, just over 3 months ago, we actually go to the same church, Jemima and I, and unbeknownst to her that I was kind of concocting this brand new authors group and this program, came up to me after church one day and said, I'm thinking of writing a book. And I said, well, that's great. We start on Thursday. And like that day, she signed up for Anointed Authors. I think she went home, probably before she even had lunch, Sunday lunch. She was signed up and in the house. Now, in her, she shared with me afterwards, she had this seed of an idea for a book, just like, how Jesus talks about a mustard seed of faith, like the smallest of all seeds.
mm,
But over this past 3 months, we've seen that mustard seed grow up, blossom, bloom, put out fruits, and actually land in the Amazon store. So, Jemima, welcome. It's so awesome to have you here in the house.
oh, thank you so much. Just as you're telling that story, just makes me laugh because I remember when I came up to you at church, and I really did have just a seed of an idea, and I just wanted to write a book, and I thought you're probably the person to talk to because I knew you have written lots of books, and I knew that I'd heard somewhere that you'd helped people sometimes, but I didn't know you were running a course or anything. Um, and then you said yeah, we're starting Thursday, and then you said you'll have it written in 90 days. And I was
Yeah.
like, you are joking. You are joking. I just thought that sounded, amazing and crazy. Like I thought there's no way other people might do it in 90 days. There's no way I can.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
mean,
yeah,
if you're going to do something audacious, you may make it like completely ridiculous. Eh?
yeah,
Let's,
yeah,
if we're going to do remarkable, let's do it with a capital R.
completely. Yeah,
But
yeah. I
a
love that.
lot of people, Jemima, would probably feel that same way. There is a bit of trepidation when, especially if it's the first time that you are writing a book, or like the
Mm,
whole scope of, well, I've got to write it, and then there's editing, and then there's publishing, and then there's covers, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It can seem quite overwhelming. So once you jumped into the program, Jemima, and I want to talk about your book more than anything, but just kind of to tell the story of how it came about. Once you jumped in the program, how did that change your mindset? How did that kind of frame this new perspective? Because you've
mm,
actually, like, from the moment you stepped in right up until this awesome day when we can hold your book in our hand, what was it changed? Something must have shifted to just like instill that faith in your heart that, man, God's on
mm.
this and I can do this.
100%. It was pretty instantaneous, really. As soon as we had that first meeting, so I signed up for the course, and I felt excited as soon as I signed up for it. But then we had our first meeting all together. There's 14 of us signed up for the course, and I have to say, your belief in us all was so infectious. It was like, gosh, this it feels like this is really going to happen. And that, so that was the first thing that was wonderful, and also meeting everybody else, seeing that, okay, it's not just me who's only got a seed of an idea. Lots of people have only got in fact, some people have got not quite sure which seed they're going to write a
Yeah,
book about at the moment, and they've just got a few ideas. And so seeing that okay, this is all right, this is, we're all at the same place pretty much. um that was really helpful. And also what I loved is that you made it really, really, like, you laid out a plan of how it was going to happen. It wasn't just okay, got 90 days, go. And I'll help you and cheerlead you along the way. You
yeah,
actually laid out a plan, almost like a, and it's not a rigid timetable, of course it's not, life happens. You were really clear about that
yeah,
you know, you don't have to stick to this, but there was a plan. And I loved that, because it kind of, it gave me a sense of, okay, that feels manageable. That's, you were kind of scaffolding it so that,
yeah,
you know, we'd do one bit and then we'd learn another bit. And then you were kind of very, very clear of, I'm going to take you through this one step at a time. Don't rush ahead. You don't need to think about editing at the moment. You don't need to think about how you format a book. Let's just start with, you know, how you just brainstorm some ideas. And it was really kind of clear, like a staged process,
yeah,
one
yeah.
step at a time. And yeah, and so instantly for me, that felt, okay, this isn't overwhelming. It had always felt overwhelming, the thought of writing a book before.
Yeah,
It felt
I'm a big fan, Jemima, of um, understanding the power of consistent action. Small
right.
actions adding up over a period of time lead to big results. And in
Mm-hmm.
your case, it led to a book being published. I mean, I mean, regardless of, you know, that, yes, there's a process in place. Yes, there's a framework. Yes, I absolutely believe anyone can do it if they set themselves to this, to this end. You know, I've seen it happen so many times that it's like I'm already seeing the book published before someone's
Yeah.
even written the first word. But regardless and aside from all that, the fact that you applied yourself to actually just follow that process, to believe that, man, if I just take this stage by stage and step by step, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, the Bible talks about building line on line. I mean, I mean, that's just a like very apt picture for us.
Very.
Line on line, precept on precept, here a little, there a little. And, you know, one of the concepts that we talk about in the Anointed Authors is that we're not necessarily writing a book, which can seem like, oh, wow, writing a book, like there's like how many thousands of words, but we're building a book. And instead
Mm,
of it being like, hey, okay, you know, just make your mansion, it's like, okay, no, well, just put the first brick in place.
yeah.
And as you, like what you've described is, as you've gone through that process, it has built something in you to the point where once you actually began putting the words on the page, it was like the scaffolding, the framework, the blueprint was already there in place. You were just
Mm,
really filling in the dots. You know, you were coloring in the
mm,
boxes, if you like, to build that book out. Because things are first conceived in the heart,
mm,
things are conceived by faith, and then we put substance to that faith. But the existence of that thing is absolutely real before we
mm,
actually hold it in our hand.
yeah.
And it's like that's what's been so exciting about seeing this whole process with you, Jemima, has just been like, I honestly, I'm like, I it sounds silly, doesn't it? But I feel like a proud dad. You know,
No, I love that.
feel like,
Yeah.
oh man, my girl's giving birth. You know,
But it does, I can really sense how, like, that pride that you had in me and all of us, you know,
oh
that
yeah.
real shepherd's heart that you've got, but that real, you really did want us to succeed. And it was so clear. And it's, that's not just a it wasn't just an intellectual, oh, I want them to succeed. I felt it, like it, and we all felt it. So
Oh, that's good. I'm
lovely.
pleased. I'm pleased. Jemima, speaking of the new baby in the house, you've got a
Mm,
copy of your book there, haven't you?
certainly have.
Yeah. Look at that. Praise the
Yeah,
Lord. That's so
yeah.
fabulous to see that. A hardback as well. I mean, that's like, oh wow, I'm gonna get the special one. I'm gonna get the
Of
real
course,
thing. Yeah.
of course.
Yeah, yeah. How did it feel when that dropped through the door?
Oh my goodness, I was nervous. So Amazon, they send their little email saying your book is due to arrive today between these hours. And I was like on tenterhooks. I thought I've got to be home for that. And then it was late arriving. It didn't come in the time. It says your driver's been delayed. I was like, oh, no.
Yeah, yeah.
But honestly, when it arrived, I opened it and I just cried. It felt so emotional seeing, because, you write a book, and I know I'm not alone. I know, lots of people who write books will feel this, that you've poured out your heart. And I certainly poured out my heart in my book. And so it's a piece of me. And just to see that, I've written something about my life. So to see it in print and to think, oh, there's something here that's of value, and that maybe other people will read this and get something from it. It felt like
Yeah, yeah.
there was some meaning to my life. It just felt like added meaning.
And I mean, Jemima, your book is very much a piece of you. I
Mm.
mean, it's a very, very personal book. And I'm sure that the process of writing it must have worked and built something and excavated all sorts of things within you as you went through that process. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a deeply personal
Hmm.
story, isn't it? I mean, why don't you tell people the title of the book and if you want to, just a little bit about what the book is about,
Yeah. Thank you.
if
So, yeah,
that's
so it's,
okay, if you're happy to. I
of
mean,
course, no, of course I am. Yes, my book is called Rise, and it's kind of a memoir, but it's a story of how I was once years ago in a Christian marriage, but it was also a marriage that was full of domestic violence, and how I hid that and the shame that came with it. So it's a story of what I went through, and also how I got out, and also how I healed and recovered. And as I've trained as a clinical psychologist in that recovery process, I've brought some psychology in, what some of the psychological processes that were involved in some of that healing, but also, hugely what God did in my heart, and how, probably because of my everyone heals at different rates. And for me, it took quite a long time to really go through that process. I was married for 16 years, and it took 16 years really to heal properly. So that's what the book's about. Hopefully it's a message of hope, and also a message of how what the Bible says about abuse. And
mm,
because sometimes there's real mixed messages about abuse and what people should put up with and submit to, and all of that stuff can be really confusing. So hopefully it's a message for people, not just who are survivors of abuse, but also for Christians and for people who know someone who's been abused. Hopefully it will be full of hope. that's
I
that's
mean,
my
your book is in parts absolutely heartbreaking, Jemima.
mm,
To read it and to know, because we knew one another. I knew you when all of this was happening,
yeah,
and yet I had no idea that that was
I,
happening behind closed doors. And I can imagine there are many, many people in similar situations. I just think, honestly, believe, Jemima, that your book is going to be used as it's going to be instrumental in bringing healing and freedom to lots and lots of people.
mm,
Um, the fact that you've had the courage to face some of those things and to then see fit to actually make yourself so vulnerable in service of others is really commendable.
thank you.
We just thank you for being bold and courageous enough to do that. Because, regardless of all the rejoicing and like, oh, wow, I've got a book and da da
Yeah,
da 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 da, da all of that. Nevertheless, it is because of the nature of what you've written. It was a very courageous act, even just to consider kind of
yeah,
sitting down and working through these things in such a what as ultimately in such a public way. But I believe that it's also an indication that where you talk about surviving, you've come through to a place where you believe that you can now thrive, not just survive. That God's
100%.
done a tremendous work. I mean, one of the most touching things for me was when you came and you spoke in the group and just shared how your children wanted to write a piece in the book as well. And I know that you've got like a short kind of introduction and a chapter at the end, like a prologue and an epilogue written by the children who grew up and have worked through all of that in when it was happening and beyond that as they themselves have grown up and become such wonderful adults. I mean, honestly,
Yeah, well,
Jemima, it made me cry when I
oh, me too. When I
yeah,
read what
I
they
mean,
said,
I can only imagine. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Amazing.
And for them, reading the book as well was very emotional, but in a good way. You know, I'm not scared of emotions.
Yeah.
It was healing. It's all this stuff that you know. I think I was so caught up in surviving
Yes.
and
Yeah.
through that you kind of often at the time you can't possibly feel all of that pain. You kind of push it down as much as possible and just push through and push through.
Hmm.
And those there was something, although you know God has done so much in my life, and you know I talk about it in the book and the process of healing and forgiveness
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of this very painful stuff, but writing the book and kind of revisiting, you know, I haven't written about everything. I've just
Yeah.
picked out a few incidents,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
just in kind of reliving those incidents and kind of taking myself back to that time, it was very, very, it was really painful, but also just to allow God into those bits of pain that I'd kind of forgotten about. You know, I'd kind of forgotten some of it, not forgotten, but suppressed it
Yeah.
for so many years, and just to revisit it, but then allow God in and to see how God was there. And it was so healing.
I mean, I felt as though there was really a level of wisdom and sensitivity in the way that you approached the subject as well. Because obviously, I mean, it could just become like a public hanging.
Of
You know,
course.
I'm
Yeah,
not being,
of
you know,
course.
you're not want to be crude, but you know, it would be very
No.
easy for it to be an
And
exercise in like,
unwavering.
here's
Yeah,
my dirty laundry and pointing fingers. But
yeah.
the whole thing, like when I was reading, just actually did display what we've been talking about, that this is not philosophical. This isn't, or not even just psychological, although I know you're a doctor of psychology.
Mm.
It was the way that you expressed yourself, carefully chose how to kind of open the curtain and open the door on some of the things that you went through. But then, like, yeah, it wouldn't lead someone to a place of just deeper anger and resentment at what they've been through. I could so see the healing process and the healing anointing was evident in what you'd
Mm.
written. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Jemima, I don't know who will be watching this or when
No.
that you'll be watching it, whoever you may be. But there will be people who are maybe facing similar situations. They might be right there in the deepest pit of the confusion and the sense of worthlessness and am I
Mm.
right? Am I wrong? What's right? What's wrong? Am I to blame? All of the things that you kind of highlight and kind of what would you say to those people, Jemima?
Um,
Buy
yeah,
my
you're
book.
so,
Yeah, buy my
yeah,
book. You know, buy the buy the book. It was
buy
like
the
no
book,
joke, but yeah. Aside
buy the
from
book.
buy the book,
But aside from the book,
yeah,
I would say, I even as you're describing it there, David, like I completely remember those feelings of being completely overwhelmed, confused, like what is the right thing to do? How do I move forward? There is no escape. I'm so trapped. I'm so stuck. and I'm so to blame, and everything, no one cares, no one cares. And
Mm.
none of that was, people do care, God cares, people care, but abuse is so um, isolating, and it comes with so much shame. And so the first thing I would say is, it's not your fault if you are in a relationship, whether it's a physically abusive, sexually abusive, financially abusive, emotionally abusive. It's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you, but this is incredibly difficult, and it's going to take some time and some love and some care and some, you know wisdom and all of this stuff and some support to get you through it. And you will get through it 100%. If you pour out your heart to God and you allow him in, he will help you. There is no question. And I know that. I have no shadow of a doubt, but it is really hard, and the scars go deep. So this isn't something that people necessarily just recover from quickly. um, God will get you through it, and he will do it at your pace and your timing. And people heal at different rates. Sometimes people heal remarkably quickly, and sometimes it takes a long time. And for me, there was some things that were quick. Like I quickly built a career. I quickly learned and went to university and built my career and learned about psychology. But there were other things. The healing, the resentment, the hurt that I felt took a long time. The way I thought, the way I felt, just so negatively about myself, the inner critical voice, all of that stuff took quite a long time to
I
to
mean,
sort it out.
one of the things, Jemima, that's I think so powerful about it is you come from. I mean, the book itself, called Rise, is it's both your story of faith and healing, but it also comes from a place of intense scrutiny and education in all of this. It's a clinical psychologist writing
Mm,
about their faith journey. I mean,
mm,
that's really a powerful coupling, isn't it?
mm,
And not often one that we see. It's either like either or, but you've
mhm,
brought together all of your psychological training, all of that, a Dr. Gemima Fitzgerald. I mean, you've got Gemima Fitzgerald written on the screen here, but there should be a doctor in front of it, right? you know this isn't something you just kind of, oh, here's a memoir of like some stuff I went through. But you've
mm,
really come from both the psychological side of things and the heart side of things and the faith side of things, the spiritual side of things, and brought them together in such a tremendous way. Because it's not a long book. It's not like someone's got to read, like, hey, here's 3,000 pages of how you'll finally get set free from this pain. You've
no,
actually been able to boil it down into something that is so easy to read and so well written that
thank
really anyone would be able to understand the things that you speak about in there, which is again just a great strength of what you've been able to do. You're a testament to your ability to communicate
you.
with such clarity, Jemima.
Well, I
Congratulations.
really want, yeah, I wanted the book to be really accessible. It's no point writing an academic style book or something that's weighty and heavy and too long. For anyone, we all like to get to the point, in a book. But especially if you're going through a really hard time in life, you might find it hard to wade your way through 500 pages, and this isn't that. This is hopefully an easy read, but a read that will pull at the
Yeah.
heartstrings, and
Oh,
you'll
yeah, yeah.
learn something. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And clearly that like hits the nail. I mean, it doesn't skirt around in any way. It's very, very, it's just so powerful. I mean, I'll be honest, I find 500 pages hard to read, even when
I
I'm
mean,
not going
same.
through a hard time. Even if I'm on top of the world, it's like 500 pages. I'm gonna have to give some consideration to this. But,
Just flick through to the end.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's got to be able to fit in my handbag. But
exactly.
no, no, amazing. And Jemima, I don't want to keep you too long, but what was your experience like as in the Anointed Authors? I mean, but why don't
Mm,
you just share a little? I know you've touched on it. Why don't you just share a little bit about maybe what you expected or didn't expect when you came in, and what the actual experience was for
mm,
you, like being part of something where you were, there was, like you say, a clear pathway. There were
mhm,
others working with you.
mhm,
What was it like doing the Anointed Authors? In case there's someone here again, someone may be watching or listening and thinking, man, I've got a seed of an idea. I've got that little thing scratching on the inside that I think could be a powerful book that could help some people.
mhm,
What would you say to them, and what was your experience like, that,
mhm.
if they chose to be part of something like this?
I would say my experience was, I've already talked about how there was a clear pathway. There was this kind of scaffolding approach. You took us one step at a time. It felt that we were being challenged and stretched, but not pushed. It just felt this was at the right pace. And it sounds like a fast pace, write a book in 90 days, but it felt like a challenge. It felt like there was a commitment involved. For sure there was a commitment, but not a push, not a struggle.
Mm.
It was a joy. And the bit that there were two things that were really unexpected for me, which was, one was the community feel, that it wasn't just a I'm joining up to. It's not like a course. It was a program. It was coaching. There was so much more to it than just
It's an
learning.
experience, isn't it?
It's an experience.
It's an
That's it.
experience. I think that
Yeah,
that would sum up. Yeah.
it's an experience. So, and the community feel from the other authors, we all encouraged each other so much. And, just to be able to be vulnerable and say, I'm really struggling today, or not, I had a breakthrough today and I wrote 2 chapters, or, whatever. It was just, that was wonderful. And the other side was the spiritual side of it. This is largely a Christian core or program. And I had not anticipated that that would be such a huge factor in this, in that I felt that I was under this. As soon as I signed up for it, I was suddenly, where it had been a seed of an idea, suddenly it was like I was getting proper ideas. I was getting thoughts. I was getting
Yeah.
a structure. It was just coming into my mind. Well, I'd been thinking about writing a book for ages. I'd never had a structure just pop into my head, but all of a sudden, it was like God was really helping me, and I really felt that I'd come under this mantle, and there was a spiritual covering from you, that this was a God ordained program. And the way I was thinking about it this afternoon, and it felt like, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of being in someone's slipstream,
Hmm.
where, if you're riding a bike and someone is much, you're just kind of tuck yourself in. I used to ride bikes, and like, it felt like I was in a slipstream, that where, you would normally, it would be hard. This did not, yeah, it was challenging, but it was not hard.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that was my experience. It felt like there was a grace upon it, where what should have felt a lot more difficult had an ease and a joy. And even in the tough times, it was still all right. So I would say to anyone, even if you're watching this and you're thinking about it, and you're thinking, do you know what, I'd love to write a book, but I don't have time, or I'm not sure if I'm good enough, or all of those imposter syndrome ideas that I struggled with. Honestly, if you have a dream, I would really say just go for it, because as you've often said to us, David, that you can think about it forever. You can sit on your ideas forever, but at some point, if it's ever going to happen, you've just got to go for it. And I remember having the thought before I approached you that day in church. I remember having a thought: if I died and I hadn't written a book, or this book,
Mm.
what would that be like? And I just had this sinking, oh my gosh, now that would be awful, because this is what I'm supposed to do. And it was at that point I knew, this is really important, commit.
Yeah. 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 I think a lot of what we go through, Jemima, is for the benefit of other people. I mean, like Joseph. I mean, I love the story of Joseph. I'm glad
Yeah.
I wasn't Joseph. I don't think
Mm.
I would have made it through quite as unscathed and in my attitude as he was, you know. And he said, you know, what you meant for evil, God meant for good, to preserve many souls alive. And not to make light of anything that you've gone through, Gemima, obviously, but you know, that unction on the inside, that compelling reason to leave a legacy that
It's
will
that.
help other people is so powerful. Is so powerful, and in a way, I think makes sense of some of the things that we go through sometimes,
Yes,
because suddenly it
yes.
becomes, well, Lord, if this can help other people, if this can strengthen, encourage, set free, and bring healing to someone else, then as much as the pain was terrible, and at times I felt like giving up, then
Mm.
Lord, it's worth it. And I'm just believing, Gemima, and I'm just going to go for it here. I'm just believing that this book is going to be used in an incredible fashion. And I believe that it's going to become a, a platform from which you will speak. And you don't mind me prophesying a little, but
Not
you
at all.
know,
Thank you.
I do,
Yeah.
I do, I really believe that I see in fact, I see a picture of you standing on a platform speaking to audiences, and the platform is your book, that hardback book. Just hold it up again in your hand and let us see it. I see yeah, I can see it, like the platform, like this big version of the Rise book, and you standing on that platform, speaking to people, speaking to audiences of people, because I believe the message that you bring here is something that really does desperately need to be heard. And people need to hear that there is hope and that there is a way that they can come through and come out the other side, as you
Mm.
already mentioned, not only to survive, but to thrive and
Mhm.
become, as you are and as you will be, an instrument of healing for others.
Mm.
It's so
Wow.
powerful. And I feel like, honestly, I feel so incredibly privileged to have played a small part in
Big
just
part. A
but
big part.
you say a big part. I mean, honestly, Jemima, it's like it's what's so sometimes it's just actually letting someone, just saying to someone, yeah, I believe it, let's do it, let's do this thing,
Yeah.
you know. It's and I just want to say thank you so much for just making that leap, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for tackling such a difficult subject in such a gracious way, you know. And honestly, I think everyone who's listening here should buy your book. I do. Let's
Thank
make
you.
Jemima rich as a result of it. No, no, we really do love you, Jemima. You've been such a blessing in the group, such an encourager, as well as being open to receive encouragement, because it works both ways. You know, it's
Yeah.
we've got to be
Yeah.
sowers and be willing to be reapers as well, be
Mm.
recipients.
Mm.
And you've been both, really. And so, yeah, thank you so much for being part of this cohort of anointed authors, and for just being such a tremendous inspiration to us all.
Oh gosh, thank you. But I've been inspired by you and by everybody in the group. You know, we've all got a story in us, haven't we? That's why we're in the group. We've all got something that God has
Yeah.
given us. And do you know what? Like, just as you were talking there, is that the Bible is true, isn't it? We know that. But
Oh,
you know,
yes.
God really does say, rejoice when you go through trials. You
Mm,
know, like, even though I'm not necessarily saying I enjoyed it at the time, but now I can see, like, every trial, if even one person reads this book
mm.
and gets, you know, closer to God and gets faith and gets through it, as cliche as it sounds, it was 100% worth it.
Yeah, yeah.
100% worth it.
And I believe you mean that sincerely, but
I do.
but there'll be many, many more than one people read this book, Jemima. I can assure you. It's too significant a story not to be told and not to be heard. And yeah, I honestly, I do believe that it's going to be an avenue for you to speak into many lives, both directly through the book, but also beyond that, as people read and think, oh, wow, would love to hear more of this story. I think you've got so much ahead of you that God's going to use you in respect to your story and everything that will come beyond that. This is only the beginning. When you press publish, that's just when things begin. That's not the end of the journey. I just get you to the beginning of the journey. So,
Thank you.
congratulations,
No,
Jemima.
thank
It's such a blessing. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, I
thank
actually
you.
love these. I love these interviews because they're just
Right.
it's so beautiful to hear just how God has moved and worked and is continuing to work through the things that we create. You're amazing.